All right, Sid, it's over to you.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. I think our resident apiarist is around. So, Molly, I'm going to turn the light on you.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. Holidays were pretty basic, didn't go anywhere. Don't have much family coming over or anything. Just working on a lot of statistics for my master's thesis. So I just spend most of my days running statistics these days.
How long have you got left before that has to be presented?
Well, I actually went an extra semester. So it would normally be 2 years. I'm going 2.5 years, and I should be done in this May.
Wow.
So well, hopefully the statistics mean something when they're all done.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. I'm sure you'll find a way to make sure they mean something. That's kind of how it works. 4 months, 3 months before your dissertation has to be presented?
Yeah, I try not to think about how short a time that is because I haven't written a word of it yet, but...
But are you a fast writer? Once you've got all your info, you just go, boom, let's do this.
I'd like to think so. Yeah, once I have it all collected in my mind and once I understand what my statistics mean, I think I'll be able to knock it out. I mean, I think it's supposed to be somewhere in the range of like 150 pages or something. So hopefully I'll have a lot to say about how bees are using wetlands. I hope there's 150 pages worth to talk about.
There will be. You write it by like 5-10 pages a day.
That would be like a nice goal if I could write consistently every day. But I feel like it's going to be one of those things where I don't write it all and then I write a whole bunch and then I don't know how it's going to work. I've never had to write something that big before.
Yeah, I'm sure you already are well above this. I've never even done a master's, but I'm sure you're just going to have to go, right, what do I absolutely cannot? Where can I not go beyond? What point do I have to stop crunching stats and writing them down?
Yeah, my advisor actually thinks that he's going to have to keep me on track to not go over the page limit. So I'd like to have his optimism.
Great. What else are you interested in? I mean, I know obviously you're consumed by bees, not literally. Yeah. When you switch off from bees, where do you go?
So Star Trek. But I do a lot of, I mean, I just like being outside in all different ways. So I go hiking, I go bird watching is a thing I do a lot. And I do some gardening and stuff, probably not as good a gardener as you are, but.
Oh no, you're bound to be.
I'm not good at growing food. I can grow non-food things, okay. But I do, macro photography. I like listening to a lot of music. This year, because of COVID and stuff, and also just because as a grad student, I've tried to get more into cooking more for myself. Yeah. So I feel like I've improved on that front. That's something I enjoy. A lot of just little different things. Most of them are probably outdoors related.
That's great. They're kind of COVID friendly because you like places where people ain't.
Yes, I feel very lucky that my lifestyle has not probably changed that much because I'm always just trying to get away from other people.
I tried to find one of those charts that has birds of the Northeast or birds, and they're very poor, the charts that I found online. They're just like, oh, that's really dull. I've seen more birds that are on than are actually on your chart. It's been a pretty spectacular couple of years for birds. It's just been, we even had hummingbirds this year. I'm sure you see them every year, but I've never seen them up here before. What's your resource so you can actually know what a bird is? Because I'm pretty good on like blue jays.
Yeah, so I'd say the guide, so there's obviously a ton of different field guides you can choose from. The one I have is a Peterson's field guide to, I think it's birds of Eastern North America. But the best online resource is Cornell has a website called allaboutbirds.org. And that has every bird in North America, a really richly detailed page that has everything about, their life history, what they look like, how to identify them, where to find them. That's the best resource for just learning the birds in our area, as well as ebird.org, which is also hosted by Cornell.
What's the ebird? What's the current wisdom on bird feeders? Because I grew up with my mother feeding birds, obviously, and we always took them down in the springtime and put them up in midwinter. We never gave them anything in the summer. Is that still the current wisdom?
It's an ongoing sort of debate, and I feel like I'm not an expert on it, but there's a lot of different viewpoints on it. Most bird watchers and bird people are okay with bird feeders if you do it like responsibly, like you said, like most people don't keep them up all year, as well as you don't want bears coming to them as well. So that's sort of part of why we take them down. There's both sides to it. I mean, bird feeders can be really helpful for birds in the winter, and it can bring them closer to your house so you can see them and everything. It doesn't hurt them as much, I think, as people think, but there are definitely bird species that, as climate change continues and, a lot of birds are moving up more northwards than they ever were, and a lot of more birds are staying in the winter when they would have migrated and left. Part of that is because of human habitation and bird feeders and stuff, but a lot of it's climate change related. So it kind of would have probably happened anyway. I've met very few people who are like really adamantly against bird feeders. There's arguments to be seen on either side, but I think most bird people are okay with bird feeders if you like give them the right food, you keep it clean, don't let mold grow in it and stuff, and you keep bears away
it
from
doesn't last long enough.
Yeah.
The squirrels are upside down and inside and out that thing, chewing up everything they can find. There's no way we can that lasts more than like a couple. I buy these sacks from Costco. They're like huge agricultural sacks of bird food. They're gone in 3 weeks in the winter, disappeared. And we have two types of squirrel. We have the grey squirrel, but we have the red squirrel, which used to be in England but is now extinct because the grey squirrel is just much more efficient. It ate all the food for red squirrels. So, but that's beautiful. Do you have red squirrels up in New Hampshire as well?
Yeah. I'm not a huge mammal person, so I'm not an expert. But from what I know, the red squirrels over in Europe are a different species, and I sort of know those are like almost endangered or something. Because I think gray squirrels are invasive in England. They were brought over there. But here, the red squirrels are native, a different species over here, and they're common. They're conifer specialists. So you only find them in areas with pine trees and spruce trees.
They're delightful. They're so tiny and delicate. Yeah. They're just the most beautiful, exquisite creatures. And we got chipmunks, of course, which was my favorite.
Yes, it's been a bumper year for chipmunks.
Every damn chipmunk has a name in this area now. Do you get sentimental about your subjects?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, especially during COVID, I feel like I find myself talking to my bees a little bit too much, probably. Anyone who studies any sort of wild animal, I think the vast majority of us get very attached. I mean, because it's that passion and that curiosity about those living things that drives us to do what we do. So if we didn't feel that strongly about connecting with them, I don't think we would be studying them.
What's the lifespan of a bee? Average?
Most bees have a 1-year life cycle. Most of that time is spent as a larva, not as an adult that's on flowers or anything. Most of them only are out collecting nectar and pollen for a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Wow. Then they overwinter as like, a larva or something.
Yeah. Wow. In UK house, there's a beekeeper over the road, one of our neighbors, and she asked if she could put some hives on our property because we've got a lot of acres and she doesn't have room. And we said, sure. She keeps expanding them. There are now 4 or 5. Started with 1. And she gives us a pot of honey every year, so that's a good deal. And it's a sort of out of the way part of the garden. I was out walking one day, just behind one of the barns, and I heard this amazing noise like I was near a freeway. And I looked up behind me, and the sky was black with bees. Just black with bees. It frightened the living daylights out of me. I have never seen a swarm of bees. I don't know what they were doing. They were probably like moving house.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
So have you been swarmed before?
I have not spent that much time around honeybees, to be honest. So I haven't experienced that firsthand, but I know of the phenomenon. Depending on the time of year, they do all pick up sometimes with the queen and move. They go looking for a new area. Once they've found a new place to live, they will all leave in one giant swarm and go.
It's magnificent. I mean, the sky literally went black. I was maybe 15 feet away. Right just behind me. I was just like, what on earth is that noise? And this swirling mass. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie behind my head. Can we see a bit of your presentation?
Yeah. This is just sort of like a very brief primer on native bee ecology. It's going to be biased towards North America and the Northeast because that's where I work in, but most of the stuff is applicable worldwide. All of the photos in the presentation are my own that I've taken here, mostly in New Hampshire. So they're things that if you live in this area, you can go outside and see these same bees for yourself. In North America, native bees refers to pretty much any bee except for honeybee, which you can see in the bottom right corner is from Europe. And in the world, there are about 20,000 different species of bees distributed in 7 different families of bees. One of those families is only found in Australia. So any of the Australian people here today. You guys have special bees that nobody else has, so congrats. But just for comparison, that's around 3 times as many bee species in the world as there are mammal species put together. So there's a lot of different bees. Here in North America, we have around 4,000 different kinds of bees. And while that varies based on where you live in the US, you could find most or all of our bee families right in your backyard if you give them the right habitat. So most people probably have an image in their minds of bees, living in a hive and making honey. But in reality, most of our bees are solitary, which means that every female bee makes a nest by herself and she feeds her young with pollen. The very few species that we have that do exhibit social behavior, as we call it, of any kind, only a tiny handful of those have colonies with queen and worker castes. And bumblebees are the best example of this, but otherwise, apart from bumblebees, it's pretty rare as a phenomenon in the bee world. Most of our bees nest in the ground. They tend to like sandy soil or bare ground on like hiking trails or in people's yards. They'll dig a little tunnel, while other bees are cavity nesters. So they'll excavate a nest in the pith of a plant stem or in man-made structures. If you have things like blackberry vines or sumac trees near you, I guarantee you have cavity nesting bees. Lastly, the most important part of a bee's life history is the diet, and that determines the niche that they fill in their ecosystem. So some bees are generalists, which means they are basically a jack of all trades. They visit many different kinds of unrelated flowers, and they tend to be our common species. And others are specialists, which have a very narrow diet. They're picky eaters, like me, so I can relate. They might only visit flowers from one plant family, one genus, or sometimes they're completely dependent on a single plant species. So they tend to be our more rare species, and depending on how common that host plant is in the landscape, it can leave them really at risk if that host plant disappears. But they're extremely important in ecosystems, and they're often overlooked in comparison to things like bumblebees. So Sid wanted pictures of bees. Here's some pictures of many bees. Most bees don't really look like the generic fuzzy yellow and black bumblebee that we think of, which we do have one of those in the center up there. There's your bumblebee, token bumblebee. But a lot of them are completely different looking. They can be metallic. A lot of our native bees are bright green. They can be blue. They can be red. They can be fuzzy or not fuzzy. Even in the Southwest US, there are some bees that are pure white or pure yellow. So those are like really cool. Some are over an inch long. Other ones are 1/10 of an inch. So there's just a huge range of what constitutes like a bee. There's really no one picture of what a bee looks like. So basically the purpose of this is hoping that maybe in the springtime, when you guys go out into your yard or your garden, you might see something that looks like one of these and recognize it as a bee, whereas maybe before you didn't know what kind of insect it was. But all of these things are different kinds of bees. So in the middle here, I just have some bullet points of the common names of our different kinds of bees. Most bees don't have common names, so these sort of just refer to large groups of different bees. But these kinds are found all over the world, so wherever you are, you can probably find most of these. For example, sweat bees are our most common bees. They're pretty much everywhere all the time. They're generalists. And so these ones are the metallic green ones up there, as well as a lot of them are gold or olive color, like the one on the top left. You can find different bees at different times of year because they prefer different flowers. So things like mining bees, cellophane bees, and mason bees are mainly out in springtime. They're pollinating a lot of forest flowers and fruit crops like cherries and apples and blueberries. And things like leafcutter bees, bumblebees, and masked bees are common in the summertime. In the late summer and the fall, you can find longhorned bees, which really like sunflowers. And if you grow squashes, you probably have squash bees, which live right in the dirt beneath squash plants, and they only pollinate squashes. I did want to mention one of my favorites, my MVP, the cuckoo bee, or a group of cuckoo bees. They're called cuckoo bees because they are nest parasites. So they invade another bee's nest and they lay eggs inside that nest, and their larva kills the host larva and eats all its food, which I think is really awesome. So there's an example of one of these in the bottom left, that nice black and red spotted one. So that's a little tiny male cuckoo bee. He's sitting right on my finger. He's very small, but they're really cool bees, often mistaken for wasps. that parasitic lifestyle actually evolved independently multiple times in almost every bee family. So it's a really successful strategy. As pollinators, they're not quite as effective, but they are very colorful. So why are pollinators important? Pollinators, which are mainly bees, wasps, and flies here in North America, and in the tropical regions, you have hummingbirds and bats also helping out with that. They're necessary for the existence of terrestrial ecosystems as we know it. So they make it possible for flowering plants to reproduce, but to take that a step further, by doing this, they're actually helping provide resources that other animals need, like vegetation that herbivores eat, by making fruits and nuts from flowers, and even habitat itself, like logs and leaf litter that comes from those plants. So without pollinators, ecosystems and food webs would start to collapse, and that means the ends of all the services that these systems give us that allow us humans to exist at all. In the realm of, human landscapes, pollinators are essential for most agriculture, and a surprising amount of that is done by wild bees rather than honeybees. So two big ones I always like to point out are coffee and chocolate, because most people like at least one of those, and those wouldn't exist without our wild bees. Quite a few bees are in serious decline, and this is something that applies worldwide. Bumblebees are considered one of the most at-risk bees right now. Many of them have had massive population crashes in the past few decades. There's a lot of reasons for bee declines, and it's a big mess of many different factors all interacting, but the biggest one is just habitat loss. Some of this is due to urbanization, but most of it is coming just from our agricultural activities, where planting corn where flowers and prairies used to be, and then sterilizing those areas with pesticides that travel for miles downwind. And not only are we destroying that habitat by literally paving over it or farming it, but we're degrading what's left. We're degrading the quality of it by all of this human modification surrounding it. And we're isolating it into tiny islands that can't support a lot of biodiversity. Basically, what it boils down to is that we're just not giving the bees the resources and the refuges they need to survive. So what can we do to help? Well, there's something that we can all do, big or small, especially those of us in suburbia. The biggest thing is just educating ourselves on the importance of native plants in our landscape, because ecosystems are just big tangles of relationships formed over time, and native plants are the basis for those relationships. Everything relies on insects. Insects are tied to native plants, and everything in ecosystems in some way relies on insects. That goes up from birds to amphibians to everything, and eventually ends up at us. But unfortunately, most of the plants that we put in our yards, in our gardens, aren't native. The things we buy at garden centers and nurseries are either exotic ornamentals, they're cultivars, or they're invasive species. And those things don't help out our ecosystems any. Luckily, there's a lot we can do. So whether you have a 1/4 acre of land or 100 acres of land, or even just a patio with room for pots, just reducing the amount of lawn that you have and adding native plants will do so much to help pollinators and our local ecosystems. That's something that you can enjoy year-round from your own home. You can also create nesting habitat by leaving patches of bare ground or buying bee hotels, and doing simple things like leaving some leaf litter in your yard, leaving rocks and logs if they don't pose a safety hazard, and not mowing down dandelions and clovers. The key is that if more and more people can get behind this and do this on their own property, then we can start to connect these small patches into something large and continuous that can support biodiversity. We can also support local farms, which takes dollars away from corporate agriculture and puts them back into our communities to support small businesses and promote sustainable practices. And anyone with a smartphone or a computer can participate in all sorts of citizen science projects, which can help scientists like me monitor native bees. And we do actually use that data for conservation. Lastly, definitely not least, just sharing that information and what you've learned with others to help get them motivated to help is a huge step in making this into a widespread movement with a lot of force for change behind it.
That was lovely. Is there a bee that is a sort of eureka bee that if people might be really interested to look at bees now carefully or try and spot them in their gardens? Is there one that we should definitely get in touch with someone and report because, it needs to be reported, to be counted?
Well, that's definitely very region specific. because most bees aren't found in the entire country or anything like that. In our area, one of the bees to look out for, I'd say, is, well, on the second slide, I had a bumblebee picture, and it was a bumblebee that was mostly yellow with a black stripe across its thorax, and that one is one of our rare species. As far as monitoring these insects go, we really only have a framework for bumblebees at this point in time, because they're one of the rare groups of bees that can actually be identified mostly from pictures. Most bees can't be identified that easily. Like, right. I have to catch them and put them under the microscope and all that. But there are things in place. One of the main citizen science things that we're using is Bumblebee Watch. And so people can use their phone and like take pictures of bumblebees, and it plots them on a map and everything. There are a few bumblebee species in every region of the country, and obviously in the world, those species are declining. I think if people go to the Bumblebee Watch website, there should be some information on what the rare species are for their region.
Well, listen, Molly, thank you very much indeed. What a wonderful presentation.
Thanks, I'm glad you liked it.
It's lovely to see you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm right outside of Philadelphia.
How are you? How's your family?
We're doing good. I have 2 girls and my husband. He's downstairs playing video games.
You know what he plays?
He's playing Halo right now.
Oh, wow. Old school. Very cool. And does it get on your nerves when he plays, or do you quite enjoy it?
No, because, you know what, he doesn't get a chance to play a lot nowadays. He used to play all the time. If he wants to get in a little bit, he does a lot. He works. He also goes to school. And
oh, wow. Yeah, he needs to unwind. Do you play video games?
You know what? I'm not really good once the video games went 3D. I was like good at Tetris, Super Mario, but once they went 3D, I had trouble grasping the third dimension.
My wife really got into it. She surprised herself. And she was just a little puzzled sometimes. She would shout out, "Do I need my fighty hands or my healy hands?" It was like, "Healy hands, please, now." But she was really good at it. How's the disease treating the suburban Philadelphia?
There's definitely cases. They're on the rise. I was going to say it hasn't affected me too much, but I'm working from home, which I don't normally do. So I guess in that sense, it's affecting me and affecting my kids as far as school and things. But they're adjusting quite well, I think.
And how is it being home so much?
Yeah, for the kids, it hasn't been that bad because they've actually been back to school. My youngest is still in daycare, and that's been open since July. And my oldest, she's been in school 4 days a week since October. That hasn't been terrible. Me, I kind of like being at home, especially now that the kids are out of the house. Having a little time to myself has been nice.
Does your partner go to work?
Yes, so he works for a benefits management company, so they never closed. They do stuff like pension payments and all that stuff, which is really essential.
I mean, it's actually going through the roof now. I hear that 27 million people are in food poverty right now in the States alone. So there's some serious trouble happening around the country. So he's probably overworked.
Always.
Yeah. What do you do? What's your line?
I'm a math professor.
Oh my goodness. Wow, fantastic. I'm a big math fan. I don't know anything about it, but I'm a huge math fan. What's the thing that you're most excited about? What do you, when you pick up a book and you're like, I'm going to check this out because this is cool.
I don't do much research anymore. I really enjoy teaching. My undergraduate degree was in teaching. And so when I went on to grad school, it was because I liked the higher mathematics, but teaching was always my goal. And that's actually the position I have. I'm an instructional professor. My favorite teaching, I love calculus.
So you teach teachers, is that correct?
I'm teaching mathematics. We do have students who are getting certified to teach, but I teach a lot of engineers, a lot of computer science, IST, information science technology. I think that's what it stands for. For
someone who gave up math before I even knew what the subdivisions were, what is calculus?
So calculus is really the study of rates of change.
Wow,
at least first semester calculus. And it does have a lot of usages. I mean, especially if you're looking at business, you want to talk about a cost equation. And when you do this thing called the derivative, you're talking about the change in cost. And you want to know, if I'm producing 5 million of something, is my change in cost going upwards, going downwards? There's a lot of rates of change is really something that we look at in almost every aspect of life.
Absolutely, especially chemistry and physics. I mean, those subjects require really precise measurements of rates of change, half-lives, etc.
Oh yes, I do see a lot of chemistry majors, biology majors, basically
Yeah.
anything in the sciences.
Yeah, certainly chemistry, I think, is about change. It's going to be all about that. I were to come to you as a first year student, and I just decided that I was good at math, or I'd just passed enough exams to get into college, and I sat in your classroom on the first day, what would you say to me? Obviously not me personally, but the group of us.
So last semester and this semester, I'm teaching pre-calc, so the class right before calculus. And I like to give kind of an overall saying, you know, what we're going to learn this semester, even though it might seem like little bits and pieces, it all comes together in calculus. So throughout the semester, I like to try and say, you know, you might not understand why we're doing this specific thing, but here's where it's going to be useful. I try to show them kind of where they're starting and where they're going. Also, something I do like to say on the first day of class is I understand that most of you aren't math majors. And one thing I like to stress in class is your ability to communicate the math. Because most of my students aren't going into mathematics and they might not need exactly what I'm teaching them 20 years from now, but they're going to need to communicate something. And so I tell them it's their job on tests and quizzes to communicate to me that they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that frightened me the most. I mean, I avoided sciences altogether, pretty much, and math, except for geography, which had a bit of science involved. And I think it was just the linguistics. I just couldn't handle the numerical, that method of speaking to each other, that form of understanding. I was too lazy, just another thing I have to learn. I love the concepts. I love the fact that, you know, these things happen and that this empirical data and that there are immutable facts. I just couldn't get my head around just looking at all these squiggles and having to remember, you know, pi and all of that stuff. And back in those days, we used slide rules, and it just blew me away. I mean, you probably arrived after slide rules. They probably had calculators to help you with all that stuff when you arrived.
Yeah, I've seen a slide rule, but I've never used a slide rule.
It's like using a sextant. I mean, really, it's a nightmare to use a slide rule. Learning that was such a nightmare. I think if I'd had you as a teacher, I might have just gone, okay, I might be able to do this. I might be able to just get over the hiccup, because I love math. I love where it leads you. My friends who are mathematicians, our conversations just go on and on and on into the middle of the night, because it's just fascinating worlds, avenues to go down. In terms of bringing up children and teaching, how is that? Is that a challenge? Because I know a lot of us in the club have youngsters, and yours sound very young.
So my daughters are 5 and 10. Right now, just figuring out, you know, transportation, picking up, dropping off, because I drive both of them. My older daughter had the option of riding the bus, and I was just like, just feel safer dropping you off. Less exposures. School was something that she really needed. I know some kids are doing great virtually. My daughter was not. So she really did need to be in the classroom. But I'm like, let's, you know, keep exposures as down as much as possible.
So yeah, at least your family's all healthy and your home has become a haven, which is really lovely. That's one of my symbols taking away from this whole COVID experience, is that home trumps workplace. And if we can make the home more holy, then everyone's going to be better off for it. I'm not sure how testing it is to all be together. My wife and I haven't had any significant problems in terms of being close to each other. We spend a lot of time apart in the house. That's, I think, one of the crucial things. I don't think you should spend all day, every day in the same room. You'd probably drive each other crazy. But we've done okay. You've got the same sense. It's weird how that's, because normally, you know, that friction would arise. I know your husband goes to work.
I think that the friction arose during some of the lockdown. But, you know, once the kids got to, especially in the summer, they got to go to camp and everything, because there were lots of outdoor activities. And now that they're more normalized, even when there might be a couple days when we have to stay inside, I think they're doing much better now that they have someplace to go on some days at least.
Absolutely. Do you have a question you'd like to ask me? Because I tend to drive through these talks without actually thinking about the other person might want to get a word in edgeways.
No, I'm enjoying this. I signed up because my birthday's coming up this weekend. And
Oh my goodness, great. You know what it's like to get 90 people or 100 people say happy birthday to you from all over the world?
I do not.
Well, check it out. This is what it sounds like.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
It's quite something. If we can bottle that, that's bottled love. We can just sell that in supermarkets and go, there you go, guys. Here's your happy birthdays.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely catching up with you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys so much for putting my recipes in the cookbook. I absolutely love Quark. Holding the thing of nachos. It's wonderful. It's gorgeous. I love it.
Didn't they do a wonderful job illustrating all that?
Such a great job.
Hours and love that went into doing that. And now you can cook while you listen to a bunch of music, whether you like classical or rock and pop, because we've got that going as well. How are you? Where are you? What's going on?
I am in Emporia, Kansas. I know Mel, my husband. He's a big Lotro fan.
Colin has a small planet or something all of his own now.
An island.
And
I own an island in Lotro. Yes, that's what I do with a mansion.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool. I decided to give him the money because I've got on the wall behind me here, I actually have the Lotro Founders Certificate. I'm one of the 2,000 people that founded the game originally, just so you know, this little thing.
That's awesome. My husband's Christmas present, I got him a Gandalf duck.
Oh.
So he's a
That's pretty
programmer
cool.
by trade. And the thing in the programming world is if you're stuck on a problem and you don't know how the code should work, you talk to the duck. And by the time you're finished explaining it to the duck, you've probably solved it in your head. And so this is his duck that he now has on his desk. And I told him that's when he wants very wise words. My 15-year-old spouted off, "You fool of a toque." Well, I guess Gandalf might call my husband a fool every once in a while if he needs wise words, but yes.
So your husband's a computer programmer, and what's your line? What are you into?
My major was computer science. I've done programming and teaching and computer support. I came home to take care of our autistic son. He needed some extra support while he's in middle school and high school.
Right.
I am also managing my mother's household. The last time we talked, my mother was living with us. Her health has declined enough that she needs more advanced care. Unfortunately, we wanted her to stay with us, but in the middle of this whole pandemic, we had to find a safe place for her to be because it just was not possible for her to be with us. And it was really, really hard.
I had the same sort of problem with my stepfather. And it was a home that he liked the sound of, et cetera, et cetera. So we crossed those hurdles. That was the most difficult thing, was convincing him that it was time that he went to a home. It was a fortune. These homes were a fortune. No normal person can afford £10,000 a month.
My father was a teacher. I guarantee you he didn't have that kind of money set aside in retirement.
Is there any chance the new government would change that?
No, Medicaid is here to stay, unfortunately, because what you're paying for is your room and your board plus 24-hour nursing care with 3 shifts to make it round the clock.
Yeah,
so you're paying for your nurses, you're paying for your nurses' aides, you're paying for any therapy, you're paying for, all of these extra services to keep that person in a good quality of life. 250 some bucks a day is actually a pretty good deal for all that they're getting. I'm grateful to learn it in my 40s so that when I get to that age, I kind of have half a clue of what I'm in for, because wow.
Absolutely.
Wow, you have no idea until you're in the middle of it and you're calling these people and they have all these rules that you don't know about when you call them, and they're like, "Oh no, you need this paper and you need this paper and we can't even talk to you," and da 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 da. And so you're on this call trying to figure out what the rules are so that they'll even have a conversation with you. It is craziness. It's
that's not really fair. I mean, the cynical part of me says they do that. Like, back in the day when doctors only spoke Greek, they did that just to screw people. I mean, Latin, they did it just sort of make sure that people couldn't get to them.
Yes.
And it's a way of saving money. Well, if they can't find us, we're not going to have to pay them. So
exactly. I love it.
So your mom's got has deteriorated since last we talked.
Yeah.
She has to go to this new place.
Yes. So we have enough plus the retirement income to kind of buffer until Medicaid can pick her up and pay the full amount. We're going to have to probably pay what they call a penalty time, where we're going to have to private pay about $8,000 a month for a certain penalty time until they will agree to
jump
take her on.
As a family, you think you might be able to do that?
Yes. We've actually hired a Medicaid lawyer to help us kind of balance everything out and figure it out so that it's not a big problem. It's manageable. It's at least in bite-sized pieces.
I can't remember if you said you had children.
3 boys.
What ages?
15, 13, and 9.
Oh, right in the zone. Okay.
Yes.
And how are they?
They're doing all right. We try to keep a rather calm household, especially with the oldest having autism. He needs that schedule and that structure repeated.
He's the one with
so
the autism.
Yes, and we're very grateful that the high school has they call it a cohort for special needs kids, so that even though everybody else is remote, he can be at the high school in his classes with his teachers and with the paras and, have that consistency for him. And that's really nice. My middle school son hasn't been to a week of school consistently all year. He's been either once every 4 days or once every 8 days, or now he's remote. My grade schooler was in school until right before Thanksgiving. I don't know if he'll go back to school here in mid-January or not. The school board hasn't decided yet.
Do you find that having one son, is it one son with autism? Mm-hmm. Do you find that has an effect on the character of your other 2 children?
Absolutely. I've actually had to sit my middle son down 2-3 years ago and tell him, your brother's different than you. Your brother's different than your friends. And you're coming to a point where emotionally and responsibility-wise, you are going to become the older brother for your brother. Yeah. So he will always be physically older than you, but you will have the capability of being responsible and doing stuff. And he does. I mean, he gets himself up in the morning in the fall to go run cross country on his own.
It's amazing, isn't it, how that teaches us so much, a responsibility like that.
Yeah. He's trying to get up and do the dishes and do the laundry. He's trying. He's really trying to work on it.
He'll grow into a more compassionate person. So, I mean, that's one thing, a gift really, from your oldest to your youngest. And is it okay keeping the kind of household kind of quiet? Is it easy?
No. Our house is not quiet until they finally crash. The Energizer Bunny and Tigger put together is my oldest. He's just go, 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 go.
Keeping the ball rolling all the time.
Absolutely.
The youngest one, the grade schooler, is he taking on more responsibility too?
He's trying. He's the baby and he's cute and he gets away with it and yeah.
If he's the cute one.
He is the cute one.
He's going to be trouble as a teenager,
Absolutely.
Yeah. He's going to be this young, handsome one. Is like, wait a minute. We're not all here.
Yeah, I'm going to be beating the girls off with a stick for this one, yes. Yeah, the kindergarten teacher, she just met him one day. So he had like a temporary teacher the first day until they actually assigned classrooms. And so the first day, the kindergarten teacher that didn't get him was like, oh, I just love him so much. He had it wrapped around his little pinky. I mean, just, I love this kid. I wish he were in my class. And I'm like, oh, buddy, you've only been around him for one day.
Uh-oh. How is their learning coming along? Because this is a pretty disruptive year. You'd think their application would be in real trouble.
It is. They have like virtual meetings for our school board. And the last school board meeting I attended, they had some pretty startling statistics about absenteeism, about grades, and how many kids had Fs. It was more than 50% than last year. Kids had Fs. I think it was almost 60 or 75% in that range of absentees. They had one absent per day, one class period. They were absent for some reason or another. The statistics were just shocking. And I know that in our community, the parents want the kids to go back to school on one hand, and then they also want to keep them safe. So I think that in sports, even they can have 2 adults attend a sport activity and that's it. So they have to have tickets to attend their child's sport activity to be able to watch them play.
Wow. I worry that this missing year, not just that it will put them back from in terms of college and their chances of getting into college, but it will be, I'm more worried about the excuse. You know, how kids will use, well, I had this COVID year as an excuse for not working hard enough to get to the right college at the last minute. I'm more worried about the excuse potential than the actual damage, but that's just because I'm cynical about my children.
I'm amazed that these kids, by the time they're done with this COVID year, they could get a job in corporate America. I mean, they do Zoom meetings. They have to manage their time. They've got to turn stuff in. They've got to do PowerPoint presentations and reports, and they got to turn it all in and make sure it's submitted. I mean, they're pretty much having to try to self-regulate without a teacher in front of them.
They are learning a bunch of skills.
Craziness.
Absolutely. We just have to make sure they don't get into this victim place where they're like, well, you know, I was a part of the COVID bunch and I can't, no wonder I'm never going to achieve anything. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You don't get to be a victim because of that.
Mine don't play the victim card. Mine play the I turned it in cards. Where's this assignment? Why are you late? Why am I getting a text message saying you're not in class? Yeah, I could put it on record, I swear. Now your son's older, right? Is he's full grown?
Yeah, way out. He's much bigger. And my stepson, who's 27, so I mean 28 actually. I keep forgetting once it gets to a certain age. Once 18, you can forget about what age your kids are.
You get to do the fun stuff with them.
Yes, I do. There was that point where I became a friend and stopped being a dad, and only became a dad for, you know, meltdowns and crises. But it was only advice they wanted and money. No discipline.
Don't forget the money.
Yes. I think the best thing you can give is something open to other countries, other cultures, is to unlock doors to those, whether it's by internet or by actual travel if you can afford it. And not for you, I don't think, with your mum in the position she's in. You're not going to be spending $5,000 for a kid to go somewhere for 3 weeks. But not for a bit, your children, but just to get excited about other cultures, because it's amazing how I don't mean to be patronizing, but in the States, so few people travel beyond the borders of the States.
Yes.
And I suspect that that's because they're not introduced to the idea of how wonderful the rest of the world is at a young age.
I have a lot of international friends, and I want to introduce my children to them. And I want them to see that, you know, it's not just a place on a map, but these are real people that live in these countries, and what we do affects them and what they do affects us. And, you know, you can talk and it might not be perfect language, but you can converse and, you know, and have a moment of connection with a person who's on another side of the world from you. It's wonderful.
Yeah. You know, you don't have to get on a plane. Now we're so lucky. We really can visit other countries and other cultures through the miracle that is the internet.
My boys are in Scouts, so I'm really kind of hoping that they can have an international pen pal and write to someone and kind of have that connection.
I used to have that as a kid growing up. I didn't do it myself, but there were other kids who did exchanges with other families. You had a French kid come to stay with you and you went to France and that kind of stuff. I don't know if that happens anymore.
I would be volunteering to send them to another house for 3 months.
Yes, exactly. I don't want your kid in exchange, though.
I might not be loved after 3 months, but...
Yeah. Oh, well, listen, it's been just lovely talking to you again. It's
been wonderful to catch up with you guys. Thank you so much.
If I can get my dust off my old PC, because I know Shauna would love it if I played Lord of the Rings again.
Yeah, he's playing right now. So, yes.
Wow. Well, we were pretty good back in the day.
He's playing with a Bjorning bear, so, you know, he's having a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Is that a warden character?
It's a new one.
Oh, no, I got that. I've got a Bjorning. I got as far as getting the bear. I love my warden. Was my favorite because of all the different combinations. I could just get through everything very quickly.
That's complicated.
I write down the moves on a post-it note by the computer, and I just.
Sorry.
Well, it's lovely talking to you both.
It's great. Thank you guys so much.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave. Don't forget picking up those backpacks.
Let's go talk to Chantel. Chantel?
I answered it either, but Chantel.
That's very sweet of you. Anything will do. Chantal.
Well, I mean, you're one to say you answered a Sid, and nobody gets it all right.
I honestly don't mind how people pronounce my name. I would spend most of my time irritable if I did. I mean, Sid, doable, but Siddig, not so easy.
Please say it all for me. I always get blown away.
The basic ones I live with are Siddig, Al-Tahir, Al-Fadil, Al-Abdurrahman, Al-Mahdi. They're the simplest ones. It's a chronology of my paternal grandparents, the whole thing. And it's not fair because they miss out all the ones that they don't consider important enough. So you can end up slipping out of the family tree completely if you didn't achieve enough or whatever it was you were supposed to have done. How are you? Where are you?
I'm good. I'm in South Carolina.
I've never been there. I've heard a lot about North Carolina recently, but because that's been in the news, and we just got a puppy from North Carolina, and they had a hurricane. Did you have a hurricane too?
Oh, yeah. Well, we get some hurricane weather every year, so it's just a hazard of living here.
Sorry, my geography is sadly deficient. Is South Carolina actually below North Carolina? Okay, so you will have endured the same hurricane as North Carolina.
So you said you just got a puppy from North Carolina?
5 months old.
Okay.
And there's this big busload of puppies came from North Carolina, and because all these puppies suddenly had no homes, and we met them in a shopping mall parking lot in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, and all these puppies started falling out the bus. Their new prospective owners came up. Everyone was hollering and saying hi. The police were around. They probably thought it was some kind of drug fest because it's 4 o'clock in the morning. People were hooting and screaming because they were so happy to see these new dogs in their lives. But that happens apparently every year there's a hurricane. There's a big hurricane, you get a lot of dogs that need to be rehoused. How is life in South Carolina? I was just riffing on the whole adoptive situation there.
It's scary. I mean, the numbers are ticking up here too. So we do have a lot of people that are now finally wearing masks and being careful. So
better late than never, I guess.
Yeah.
What is the mentality behind that? Because I guess you live in one of the states that sort of proudly belligerent about that sort of thing and fiercely independent. Having with your ear on the ground just as a native of that area, or not native necessarily, but someone who lives there, what do you think the motive for that was?
It's hard for me to understand. All my life, I've heard very smart people say, hey, we could have a pandemic, this could happen. So I just kind of assumed all my life that people would follow scientific recommendations all the way through. And so honestly, it's kind of broken my heart this year, Sid.
Yeah. Americans, I can be general about this. They're kind of loving people. Anywhere you go in the States, back in the day, you meet loving people everywhere. People who are just genuinely nice, welcoming. They don't want to talk about religion or politics, but they will be cheerful and happy. As by and large, obviously, race impacts that and sexuality impacts that a bit. But that's the general feel that I get. And yet something about this virus brought out some of the worst things. I mean, it's like not wearing a mask. It's like going into a maternity ward and lighting up a cigarette every day. All those babies might not die. One of these days, maybe only 1% of them will die, but 1% will die. And that is that's the degree of inconsideracy. But those same people are fine about not going into hospitals and smoking cigarettes. It's the same freedom has been taken away from them. Someone just said, hey, you can't smoke a cigarette in hospital anymore. They didn't go, wait a minute, and keep doing it. It just puzzled me why they chose to shift the goalposts for this particular pandemic. And it's been really harmful to all of us, not just the physical, but the psychological, because we just lost a little bit of faith in our fellow people, which we had. We did think, if there's a war, we'll come together and we'll fight it.
Yeah.
And we did. We just didn't. I'm puzzled. I'm lost. I've been sitting here over the last 8 months with you guys. I've really just been saddened by the fact that everybody despises each other. And I can't understand it. I can't get my head around it because it didn't exist before.
Well, I think one of the things that I hear you say a lot is that you're not on social media. And I think that's like the most wonderful thing, that you create this very open, honest, and sweet atmosphere here. But the fact that you're, not on Facebook, not on Twitter, you miss what these platforms that should have been open modes of communication actually became, which is don't ever get on social media. I mean, I don't want you to see it.
I'm not going to get on it because I don't want people to know that much about me. I don't mind here if you come voluntarily into our house, all of us, then fine, you'll learn what you need to learn and we'll post some of it online. But I don't want people to know, I don't need people to know that about me. I don't need them to like me. And I think that's kind of what drove the whole movement in the first place, this need to be, liked, adored, told you're brilliant, admired, the photographs, the bicycles, the meals you make, the kids you have.
I mean, I've always hoped that it would be a conversation, an exchange of ideas online, but of course it turned into a lot of what you're talking about.
But I'm suspicious of anything that has self-promotional quality associated with it.
So I can't ask you about Skylines then? It's a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. A little intense for me the first time through, especially with the music. Honestly, I think the reason that they gave you the rating they did was because of partially the music, because everything else, like without that, it's not as like, oh my God, it's going to happen yet.
It's a sort of work that I love to do. And every now and then I'll do something like it that is just leave your brain at the door and just have some fun for a couple of minutes and see what happens. Let all these guys do the work, the actors, and we'll, try and entertain you without teaching you anything. That was really good fun. And I really liked how it came out. I don't think they're putting it up for an Oscar. I think I'm not sure they're expecting to win awards in March. I watched it, I thought it was honest, and I thought it was basically what you see is what you get. It was low budget, it was brave, it was very generous. I think everything the director knows about anything is in the movie. He hasn't kept anything out, kept the secrets to himself. That's all he's got. And I thought the performances were terrific. And the young person who is Lindsay, who played the lead character, wasn't she good? She was credible in combat, really credible at beating the crap out of people, and really charming. I mean, she did something that a lot of actors can't do. They can't do both. But this person who was acting for us, did it really convincingly, both ways. She's really good. I was really chuffed with it. Did you like it?
I did. I saw that scene that you were talking about with the red and blue light in the walker, right? It was just gorgeous. It was so pretty. It was amazing.
It was beautiful, wasn't it? We did do some special effects, but a lot of it was actually shot in camera. I didn't do a lot of acting to a tennis ball, put it that way, which I do a lot of. I had actual people there. I had a good time. You really can't pick the movie apart too much. It's not a movie that you can go, yes, well, I think the director meant metaphysically here. You're not going to get that conversation out of this movie. There are elements of it. It talks about identity. It talks about who you are, male, female, obviously race, those things, but in a sci-fi way, in the correct sci-fi way, or sci-fu, someone told me it was. Is there any element to it that you thought, nah, apart from the music, because it did a lot of that heavy thrash rock. He did like to do that. Very Neil Marshall-esque.
Okay, so there was an effect towards the end, your last scene, where you must have had to really imagine quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I think I know what we're talking about. That was really difficult. We had special effects. So for example, I had to get picked up by something with tentacles. That's really hard to do because I'm standing there. I know that behind me, the door is going to open any second. Out of the door is going to come two huge arms and just go whoop, 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 and grab me. So I have to try and imagine, because they're not there. So I have to try and imagine. The director shouts, okay, door's opening. First tentacle, what? And I feel the first tentacle. Second tentacle, what? And then he rips me off the floor. So you have to do that first movement. So you really go, what if I was a kid again and I actually was being killed by a shark? And remember all the passion that kids put into it. It's like, you have to do that. And then they will use little bits of that. So with the minute I start to move, it looks like I'm about to leap off the ground. They catch that. So I'm off. And then they don't have to worry about me landing rather lamely after another second later, just going, ooh. They've got the bit with the energy. And then they cut it all together. It looks okay. And I thought they did a pretty good job.
And you guys shot in Lithuania, I think you said?
Really cool country. Really weird. I didn't know.
Beautiful.
It's
the shot
beautiful.
was,
And they have wild lupins. You know, we buy lupins in the store and they're fortune, but they have a native variety. And we were there just as it was out, and it's purple lupin. And it was just across all the fields, where as far as you could see lupins, and it was just beautiful. And their main town called Vilnius is a gorgeous neo-Baroque town. It's probably very old, but the architecture looks mid-18th century, late 18th century. Really good food, really friendly people. I really enjoyed that country. To be honest, I had absolutely no idea it even existed. If you'd asked me to name the countries of the world, I would never have remembered to say Lithuania. It's like one of those countries that's a marvelous discovery, and it's very reasonably priced.
When you were talking about travel earlier, you had a lot of people saying, oh, we don't have money to travel, but I've had so many friends tell me, oh, no, you can. You just have to know how.
The people who travel more than anyone else are the poorest people on the planet. They're students. They get on trains and buses and they just go. But obviously, it's time too. But I think you don't have to travel necessarily physically. I think you actually can use the internet and nature shows and stuff like that. And then over time, you build a dream and you save for that dream. So over 10 years of dreaming, you have enough money to spend 2 weeks to go to the country you've dreamt of for 10 years. Europeans are lucky because they have countries very local to them. So 400 miles, you're in another country, rather like states here. And those are different languages every time you cross a border, which is kind of cool. But I think trying to get to China would be a dream of mine, or to Vietnam, or cultures I'm just not familiar with, that I know I would learn something from, but who seem completely alien to me. They're the ones that really excite me. Do you have a country that you'd like to visit?
A friend of mine was just talking about Scotland earlier tonight, and Neil Gaiman mentioned the Isle of Skye on a recent podcast. I looked it up. It looks so gorgeous. But that's the kind of thing that Iceland, the really beautiful places I would like to see.
There's a rock festival in Iceland once a year in the spring. So I think it's a solstice. They bring all the kids. There's huge fields and they play music on a stage. It's all very herbal and very safe seeming. And all the children are running around, and Iceland's like that. And it has this amazing countryside in Norway. Gosh, they're beautiful. I don't know what happens in Greenland. That's a kind of mystery place to me. It's also a sort of very northern place. Scotland is ravishing, absolutely beautiful. And when I was a child, we used to go there every year. Beautiful people, beautiful, beautiful country. And the food's getting better, which is terrific. The food was the only letdown of Scotland when I was growing up. But now it's fantastic because they've got international food. Same as England. England used to have terrible food. You used to go to a restaurant or pub and you eat, and it's like, what are we eating? But now we're eating everything from all over the world, and it's much, much better food. It's really delicious. Well, Scotland's a good place to go, even in your imagination.
Yeah, that's about it right now.
Yeah. They're great people. Very different from one city to the next, you'll find. Edinburgh and Glasgow are like night and day. Do you have an interest in going to any of the countries like what we think of as the Far East countries, like Indochina?
I mean, I would love to travel just generally, but traveling alone is, it's a challenge.
Traveling alone I can't imagine that would be a good idea. I know that it would be a good idea to build a relationship with someone who loved to travel, a friend of some kind. That generally doesn't happen till you reach retirement age, because you don't really have time for that sort of thing. Two people really ready just to travel somewhere. I did a movie called Cairo Time, and it gives you a real sense of Cairo.
Your co-star.
Absolutely.
Like, that's what I'm afraid of, what she went through. It's an awesome movie.
It's amazing, though, that once you break away and all the major cultural barriers, the different things that we are very similar. I'm doing this project that's sort of looking into Saudi Arabia right now. The more I look into it, the more I realize the similarities between hardcore Saudi Arabians and hardcore people in the West. very similar in terms of moral things they have to do, and there's recrimination for people who transgress or betray them, and the government structures are very different. But the actual things, I mean, we have the vice president right now, he wouldn't eat famously at a table with a woman that wasn't his wife or something like that without her present. That's very Saudi Arabian. That's a very Orthodox Muslim attitude. So there's weird similarities, but I'm much more interested in the differences because I love differences. Do you have a favorite pastime, a thing that you love to do that you aren't doing right now, or you are doing that you get to still do?
I like gardening and hiking and things.
What grows in South Carolina? Do you have those amazing, I guess they're kind of threads of something that hang off the trees, a sort of
Spanish moss.
moss?
It's closer to the coast than I am, but yeah, we do. And it is really beautiful.
Do you have a quite a tropical climate?
Close to the coast. We have snow where I am. I'm at the state capitol in the middle.
So you have a quite seasonal period. But is it temperate? Does it get very cold, or does it get to below 26 or something like that?
It'll get in the teens for like a night or two as our low. Yeah, it doesn't get very cold.
I mean, I only think in terms of Celsius.
Yes, I meant Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Fahrenheit is so illogical. It makes absolutely no sense. Why, 0, freezing, 100, boiling. Common sense, easy, got it. But now I'm like, what, 32 is freezing or something, like 27? I can't remember. My wife's always having to tell me when freezing is. And I'm like, what? Oh gosh, it's freezing tonight? But plants generally don't like -5 Celsius. And I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. So when you slip below -5, you lose a lot of plants. But some plants absolutely love it, like the ones up in New England here. You got some herbs like thyme, rosemary, they can handle any old weather. You might be in a climate where you don't get below that danger zone very often. So you can have a whole abundance of different plants.
That's true.
And a lot of plants love cold over winter, especially, bulbs, for example. Apple trees and those sort of things. They need to freeze a little bit. So you've got a lot of choices. There
are some things we can't do, like you can do rhubarb, and we can't really do rhubarb here.
Why? Is it not cold enough?
It's not cold enough.
Yeah, I can do rhubarb in England. Grows like a weed. And we don't get that cold. I wonder whether it's something to do with the soil type.
Oh, maybe. My parents only told me it was the cold, but
if you want to make it colder, put it in a pot. And if you put it in a pot, it'll get colder. We often kill stuff in pots, but if it's off the ground in a cold place, in a ditch or something like that, in the garden, it'll get very cold. What do you grow?
I wanted to actually show you. It doesn't look great. That's a lemon tree from my uncle who is in Boston. He actually grows them in his apartment in a pot like that.
Wow.
So I wanted to tell you, since you're a gardener and since you expressed interest a couple weeks ago.
Can I see it again?
It's not very healthy.
Well, it's the middle of winter. Yeah. Do you get problems with a kind of black scale on the leaves?
Yeah, I actually have 3 of them, and I had to cut one back because of that, because I just couldn't get it all off.
I wonder if that's a light issue. Is it nice and bright in that corner in the winter?
It's the best I can do in my house. It is close to a window.
Well, it's probably fine then. I put the lemon tree outside in the summer and bring it in the winter, and I got this black scale over winter. And I couldn't figure out what was going wrong. And I think either it was too dry and hot or not enough light. You think it doesn't look healthy, but I know it's the middle of winter, and that is pretty fine.
Well, thank you.
That looks really happy. I bet it gets a couple of lemons in the summer.
Not yet. Hopefully this coming year.
You might want to take it down a little bit.
The chat's saying that too. I could try that. I could turn it a little.
No more than a third. And you just have to take it down in stages. Otherwise you'll shock it. Take it down a little bit this year, and then next year take it down a little bit more, and it'll start to get bushier and bushier. Well, the smell of a lemon tree in your house must be really nice to come home to.
Yeah.
Those leaves smell delightful. And you can cook with them. But
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you have to dry them. They get a bit tart if you don't dry them. Well, it's been lovely talking to you.
That's great to talk to you too. Mel surprised me. I didn't know I was going to, so this is great. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you. It was lovely to meet you. Have a good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are.
Good night. Sayonara.
Right,
Happy night, everyone.
I don't know.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Happy whatever.
Goodbye.
Good night.
Farewell.
Safe. Good
Auf
night.
Wiedersehen.
Bye.
Good night.